Hey guys, where are you watching from? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Drop your answer in the comments, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next suspenseful story. I never imagined a day like this would come, the kind of day you think only happens in movies or in the whispered gossip of family feuds. Yet there I was, standing in the lobby of the Grand Hall in downtown Los Angeles, my heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nerves. I had spent the entire week preparing for this family gathering, meticulously choosing my dress, a soft, deep burgundy silk that complemented my age without trying too hard, hair perfectly styled, makeup light but elegant. I had wrapped the gift with care, a vintage silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother, polished to a soft shine, each hinge oiled so it would open smoothly. It was a piece of family history, something I thought would be appreciated by those who remembered my sacrifices, my loyalty, my years of unwavering support. But from the moment I stepped into the hall, something felt off. The hum of chatter that usually greeted me warmly was replaced with a sort of polite avoidance. Cousins I had known since childhood barely acknowledged my presence. Distant aunts gave tight, rehearsed smiles. I tried to brush it off, telling myself nerves or simple oversight could explain it, but the pit in my stomach refused to lie. I clutched my clutch tighter, spanning the room, trying to find my place in what should have been the familiar tapestry of family. As I approached the long, beautifully decorated dining table, my hopes dwindled. Names meticulously written on cards were arranged in a way I did not recognize. The very seat I had always claimed for myself, next to my cousin Henry, who had always been my anchor in these chaotic family events, was gone. My name was absent. I paused, pretending to admire the floral arrangements, but my mind raced. How could this happen? Had someone forgotten? I tried to call out, but the room seemed suddenly vast, and my voice felt small, swallowed by the laughter and clinking glasses around me. Then the first whispers reached me. From across the room, I overheard fragments of conversations, snippets that made my chest tighten and my hands tremble. She doesn't need to be there tonight. She's always so dramatic. And worse, we'll let Margaret think she's invited, but we'll just hide her away. I froze, unable to process the betrayal in real time. Hired help? Hidden away? My mind raced through every interaction I had had with my family in the past months, the small comments, the curt replies to my messages, all now painfully recontextualized. They had planned this humiliation, this deliberate exclusion, orchestrated with care and precision to make me feel invisible in the crowd that was supposed to be my own. I remember retreating to a corner, trying to collect myself. The once familiar scent of polished wood and lilies in the air now felt suffocating. I could hear the laughter of my nieces and nephews, blissfully unaware, my cousins whispering, the clinking of champagne glasses echoing like mockery in my ears. The feeling of being invisible, of being considered a guest only in name and not in reality, was suffocating. My years of devotion, of care, the endless hours spent keeping family matters afloat suddenly felt meaningless. I wanted to scream, to storm in and demand answers, but some part of me, the part that had survived years of subtle indignities, remained quiet, watching, calculating. As I stood there, watching the orchestrated harmony of exclusion, my mind drifted back to the years that had brought me here. I had given up opportunities, postponed vacations, missed birthdays and milestones, all to be the one everyone relied on. I had been the anchor for my siblings during divorces, the mediator during fights, the one who silently covered the mistakes of others, always hoping that one day, when my time came, my loyalty would be recognized. But now, standing in the corner, clutching a gift meant to honor family tradition, I realized that recognition would never come from them. I caught sight of my cousin Rachel, who had always been close to me, laughing softly with someone I didn't recognize. Her gaze skimmed the room, avoiding mine entirely. I felt a flash of disbelief. Rachel? My confidant? My support in childhood skirmishes and adult misunderstandings? How deep did this betrayal go? My stomach twisted, a cold knot of hurt and anger. Every smile, every laugh, every moment I had trusted someone in this room now seemed like a lie. And as the whispers grew louder, more precise, more cruel, I realized this wasn't just a slight oversight. This was a meticulously crafted plan to humiliate me in front of everyone I had ever cared about. I remember the countless hours I had spent preparing for this day. The dress, the locket, the perfectly kenned card, all symbols of love, respect, and connection. And yet here I was, treated as if my presence was a mistake, a shadow to be ignored. It struck me that my family had forgotten what it meant to be kind, to honor each other's presence, to recognize years of sacrifices. They had chosen shame over respect, cruelty over empathy. And in that moment, my vision tunneled, the voices around me muffled by the roar of my own heartbeat. Then came the small details that confirmed the extent of the betrayal. A family friend, passing by, whispered, "They've set up a separate table for her. She'll be seated near the staff, away from everyone." My hand tightened around my clutch until the knuckles turned white. A separate table? Hidden away? My own family had decided I did not deserve to sit among them, to share in the laughter, the memories, the joy of being together. They had reduced me to an afterthought, a shadow in the corner, someone whose presence was tolerated only in secrecy. I wanted to retreat, to leave and never return, but a small, stubborn part of me, the part that had endured years of hardship, that had survived betrayals before, refused to break completely. I stayed, observing, noting every face, every movement, every cruel glance. The whispers became clearer, more venomous. "She always thinks she's the center of attention. It's time she learned her place." The words pierced through me, sharp and deliberate. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, but I refused to wipe it. Let them see, I thought. Let them witness the impact of their cruelty. My mind wandered to the sacrifices I had made over the decades, the quiet choices, the unseen labor, the love I had poured into a family that now chose to discard me publicly. I had delayed my own happiness for theirs, supported them through bankruptcies, marriages, divorces, and crises, always silent, always steadfast. And now, at 46, the very family I had nurtured had orchestrated my humiliation. The emotional punch was devastating. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my shaking heart and pounding heart. There was a decision to make. I could continue to suffer in silence, swallow the humiliation, and endure the night with my dignity slowly eroded, or I could reclaim it, take control of the narrative, and remind them, silently, powerfully, that their cruelty did not define me. I chose the latter. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped away from the shadowed corner where they had cast me, smoothing the fabric of my dress, lifting my chin. I walked towards the exit, each step echoing through the hall, a quiet declaration of self-respect and defiance. And as I reached the doors, I glanced back. I saw the surprise in their eyes, the momentary pause in laughter as they realized I was leaving, not in tears, not in despair, but with calm dignity. The table set for me remained empty, a stark symbol of their cruelty, while I stepped into the cool night air of Los Angeles, feeling an unexpected sense of liberation. I had not won their approval or their love tonight, but I had reclaimed my own power. The betrayal was theirs to bear, and the justice, however small, was mine in walking away with my head held high. And in the quiet solitude of the evening, I felt a strange, bittersweet peace. The city lights shimmered indifferent to family feuds, offering a vast canvas of possibility beyond the narrow walls of that hall. My journey, I realized, was not defined by those who sought to diminish me, but by my own resilience, my own choices, and the knowledge that I would never again allow humiliation to be orchestrated at the hands of those I had once trusted completely. After that night, I spent hours alone in my apartment in Los Angeles, sitting by the window as the city lights flickered in the distance, each one a tiny beacon of life moving on without me. The betrayal I had experienced at the family gathering gnawed at my thoughts like a relentless tide. I kept replaying the whispers, the sneers, the deliberate arrangement that left me hidden away while everyone else celebrated. The weight of it pressed down on me, not just the embarrassment, but the years of unnoticed labor, of sacrifices I had made in silence, all reduced to a cruel joke. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by memories of my childhood, the moments I had learned to give without expecting in return, to support without recognition. I remembered my mother, patient and loving, who had taught me that family comes first, that loyalty is everything. I had followed her example to the letter, becoming the person who could be relied upon to patch wounds, smooth over conflicts, and shoulder burdens that were never truly mine. But somewhere along the way, I had failed to see the cracks forming around me, the subtle resentments, the small exclusions that had gone unnoticed until now. The next morning, the city seemed brighter, mocking even, as if daring me to rise above the darkness of the night before. I forced myself to leave the apartment, to walk through the streets of Los Angeles and feel the pulse of life beyond my betrayal. I visited the small cafe around the corner, ordered a coffee, and sat in a corner booth, notebook in hand, trying to make sense of my feelings. Writing had always been a refuge, a way to untangle the mess inside my head, and now it became a lifeline. I began to jot down fragments, the whispers, the hidden table, Rachel's avoidance, the laughter that had cut through me like a knife. The act of writing made the memory sharper, more precise, and strangely, more empowering. As I sat there, I received a text from my cousin Henry. My chest tightened as I read it. "Margaret, I know what happened yesterday. I can't change it, but you should know I never agreed with it. Please talk to me." Relief and pain collided in my chest. Henry had always been my ally, the one person I thought I could count on unconditionally. Yet even his words were a reminder of the betrayal. They were powerless against the orchestrated cruelty, incapable of undoing the humiliation. Still, I replied cautiously, arranging to meet him later in the day. I needed clarity, an anchor to navigate the storm that had erupted in my life. Meeting Henry was like stepping into a world I had temporarily forgotten. His apartment, modest but warm, smelled faintly of coffee and old books. He greeted me with a hug, firm and steady, the kind that reminded me of the brotherly bond we had shared since childhood. We sat, coffee mugs in hand, and he recounted what he knew. It turned out that the decision to exclude me was deliberate, coordinated by a coalition of aunts, uncles, and distant cousins who resented my influence, my voice, my ability to hold the family together. Their motives were petty: jealousy, old grudges, the discomfort of seeing someone age gracefully while they struggled with their own lives. Hearing the details, I felt a mix of sorrow and rage. The betrayal was worse than I had imagined. It was systemic, a conspiracy disguised as tradition. Henry's voice trembled as he spoke, guilt evident in his eyes. I tried to stop it, Margaret. I argued. I begged them to reconsider. They didn't care. I listened, my hands wrapped around my coffee, knuckles white. The warmth of the mug contrasted sharply with the cold reality of their intentions. Years of trust, of love, of loyalty had been discarded for the sake of a carefully constructed humiliation. As the afternoon sun waned, I walked through the streets again, reflecting on what Henry had told me. Each step was measured, deliberate. I thought about the gatherings, the weddings, the anniversaries, all the times I had given of myself without question, and realized how much of my life had been defined by the expectations of others. I also realized that their cruelty, though sharp, had awakened something in me I'd long ignored, a refusal to be silenced, to be diminished, to allow others to dictate my worth. I spent the next few days observing my family from a distance, keeping tabs through social media, mutual acquaintances, and occasional conversations. Each post, each picture, each seemingly innocent update from the gathering was a reminder of what I had been denied. The humiliation lingered, but so did a growing sense of strategy. I could no longer be the silent observer. If they intended to shame me publicly, I would reclaim my narrative privately, carefully, and with precision. I began to document everything: the guests, their interactions, the hierarchy of seating, the whispered jokes, the exclusionary behavior. Each note was a piece of evidence, a record that I could rely on when the time came to confront the situation. It was therapeutic, almost like assembling the pieces of a puzzle I never asked to complete, but now needed to see clearly. I also started reconnecting with friends outside the family, those who had always respected me, who could remind me of my value beyond the narrow, cruel confines of my relatives' machinations. Then came a phone call that shook me to my core. It was Rachel. Her voice, when I finally picked up, was cautious, almost defensive. "Margaret, I need to explain," she said, words faltering. I let her speak, letting the stream of excuses and justifications pour out, each one another reminder of her complicity. She tried to shift blame, to frame it as a misunderstanding, as tradition, as something beyond her control. But I had already cataloged the moments, the gestures, the choices. There was no misunderstanding. There was deliberate betrayal. And yet, listening to her, I felt the tiniest flicker of empathy. People, even those we love, are often incapable of acting rightly when caught in the crossfire of their own fears and insecurities. I spent the next night in a restless state, thinking about the future. I knew I could no longer participate in family events the way I once had. I had to establish boundaries, create distance, and perhaps even redefine relationships entirely. The thought was painful. Loyalty, after all, is a muscle honed over years, and severing it feels like losing a part of oneself. But the alternative, submission to humiliation, was unbearable. I realized that dignity, once surrendered, is nearly impossible to reclaim without deliberate action. By the weekend, I had begun making plans. I would host my own gathering, small and intimate, inviting those who valued my presence, who respected my contributions. It would be a celebration of connection, not manipulation, joy, not cruelty. The process of planning it, imagining the faces of people I trusted, and knowing I would not be subject to the sneers of my betrayers, brought a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since the gathering, I felt the faint pulse of control, of empowerment coursing through me. Yet, even as I planned, I could not ignore the lingering wounds. I thought about the holidays, the birthdays, the weddings I would attend, knowing that some family members would continue to view me with disdain, to plot in subtle ways. It was a bitter realization, but one that steeled my resolve. I was no longer a passive participant. I would assert myself, not through confrontation alone, but through presence, through the careful cultivation of respect, through the demonstration of a life lived on my own terms. By the end of the second week, I had made a decision. I would confront the situation, not with anger, but with quiet, undeniable strength. I would remind them that betrayal has consequences, not always dramatic, not always immediate, but lasting. And in doing so, I would reclaim my sense of self, my dignity, and my rightful place in the narrative of my own life. The hurt remained, a deep and lingering ache, but so did clarity. I would no longer allow manipulation, exclusion, or cruelty to define my existence. Late one night, as I sat at my desk reviewing my notes, I felt a strange combination of sorrow and anticipation. Sorrow for the family I had believed in, for the trust I had placed in those who ultimately chose shame over love. Anticipation for the journey ahead, for the moments when I would stand tall, when my voice would be heard, when the quiet strength I had cultivated for decades would finally manifest in ways that could not be ignored. The chapter of humiliation was behind me. The chapter of reclamation had begun. And in that quiet, solitary moment, I understood something profound. Betrayal, no matter how sharp, can never truly define you unless you allow. The days following my decision to reclaim my dignity were filled with quiet preparation. I refused to let my family see the extent of my hurt or the storm brewing inside me. Outwardly, I carried myself with the same calm demeanor I had maintained for years, but beneath the surface, my mind was alive with plans, small, deliberate actions designed to assert my presence and make them reckon with the cruelty they had inflicted. Los Angeles was my stage, my apartment my sanctuary, and I intended to wield them both with precision. I began by reconnecting with family members I knew had always valued me, but were sidelined by the orchestrated hierarchy. Phone calls, casual lunch invitations, and heartfelt messages slowly built a network of allies. These were the people who understood my worth, who had witnessed my sacrifices, and who could provide not only emotional support, but also validation that I was not, as my betrayers had implied, irrelevant or insignificant. With each reconnection, I felt a sense of empowerment, a recognition that while some had chosen cruelty, others remained steadfast, and their loyalty reinforced my resolve. Then came the idea of hosting my own gathering. It wasn't a grandiose plan or a competition with the family gathering they had orchestrated. It was a deliberate act of reclaiming space, of creating a moment where my presence mattered. Invitations were carefully curated. Only those who valued me, who respected me, and who had not participated in the betrayal were included. It was a small circle, but powerful in its intention. I spent hours selecting the venue, arranging the seating, choosing the music, and planning the menu. Each detail was infused with thoughtfulness, a stark contrast to the neglect and cruelty of the family gathering. As I worked, memories of the betrayal continued to surface. I thought of the whispers, the laughter, the deliberate exclusion, and Rachel's hesitations. I realized that part of my journey was not just reclaiming dignity, but also understanding the motivations behind such actions. Family dynamics are complex, and cruelty often hides under layers of jealousy, insecurity, and fear. Recognizing this did not lessen the sting of betrayal, but it allowed me to approach the situation with a more strategic mindset. My goal was no longer revenge in the conventional sense, it was reclamation, a demonstration of strength that could not be undermined by their pettiness. The day of my gathering arrived, and I felt a mixture of anticipation and serenity. As I walked into the venue, elegantly dressed in a deep emerald gown that highlighted both age and grace, I was met with warm smiles and genuine embraces. This was a stark contrast to the cold, orchestrated atmosphere of the previous gathering. Conversations flowed freely, laughter echoed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the joy of belonging, not as an afterthought, but as the center of a circle that truly valued me. Yet, even amidst this celebration, I remained vigilant. I knew that my family would eventually learn of it, and I wanted to ensure that my dignity and strength were on full display. Photos were taken, candid moments captured, and every detail carefully curated to reflect a life lived fully and with integrity. It was not about flaunting or proving anything to my betrayers. It was about embodying a presence they had tried to erase, demonstrating that exclusion and humiliation could not diminish me. A week later, word of my gathering reached my family through mutual acquaintances and social media. The reactions were varied. Some were indifferent, others curious, and a few predictably resentful. Rachel reached out again, her voice now tinged with unease. "Margaret, I didn't expect it to be so beautiful. I see now I misjudged things." I listened quietly, feeling a mix of vindication and pity. Her words were too little, too late, but they served as a reminder of the power of presence and authenticity. I responded with grace, neither gloating nor forgiving prematurely, simply acknowledging the observation. In the weeks that followed, I began to encounter more subtle forms of reconciliation from those who had orchestrated or supported the initial betrayal. Some offered tentative apologies, awkwardly phrased and clearly uncomfortable. Others remained silent, avoiding contact entirely. I realized that my approach did not require immediate confrontation or dramatics. The very act of living with dignity, of asserting my worth through action rather than words, was creating ripples that could not be ignored. It was a quiet, powerful form of justice that required patience and self-control. One afternoon, I received an invitation to a smaller, more intimate family gathering, one that included some of the very people who had participated in my humiliation. Initially, I hesitated. The memory of the previous betrayal was fresh, and the thought of re-entering that space stirred both anxiety and anger. But I recognized it as an opportunity, not for revenge, but for a controlled confrontation. A chance to observe, assert boundaries, and maintain my dignity. I accepted, setting clear personal intentions. I would not allow old wounds to dictate my behavior. I would maintain composure, and I would ensure that my presence was acknowledged and respected. The gathering was tense at first. Glances were exchanged, smiles forced, and the air thick with unspoken words. I walked in with confidence, greeted with polite nods, and took my place among the guests I had chosen to engage with. The subtle shift in atmosphere was palpable. My calm, dignified presence seemed to unsettle those who had previously sought to undermine me. Conversations flowed freely, laughter echoed, and I participated selectively, speaking with clarity and poise, ensuring that my voice was heard without dominance. It was during this gathering that I overheard a conversation that crystallized the depth of the previous betrayal. A cousin, attempting to justify past actions, whispered, "We didn't realize. She's stronger than we thought. We underestimated her." The words, while a faint acknowledgement, carried a powerful resonance. They confirmed that my strategy, patience, dignity, deliberate action, was effective. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not in their fear, but in the recognition that truth and integrity could not be easily dismissed. As the evening progressed, I reflected on my journey. The humiliation of being hidden at the family gathering, the whispered cruelty, and the deliberate exclusion had been devastating, yet it had also been transformative. I had rediscovered my own strength, cultivated a network of genuine support, and learned that dignity is not granted by others, but claimed by oneself. The experience had reshaped my understanding of family, loyalty, and personal boundaries, teaching me that sometimes the most powerful form of response is not anger or confrontation, but living fully and authentically. By the time I left the gathering, I felt a sense of closure, not complete, but significant. I had navigated the complexities of betrayal, asserted my presence, and maintained my dignity. The journey was far from over. Family dynamics are rarely linear, and challenges would continue to arise. Yet, I now possessed a framework for handling them, rooted in patience, strategic action, and unwavering self-respect. Returning to my apartment, I sat by the window, reflecting on the past weeks. Los Angeles stretched before me, vast and indifferent, a city that neither judged nor conspired. It was a perfect mirror of my internal state, expansive, resilient, and capable of growth. I understood that betrayal, while painful, can catalyze transformation, and that the true measure of character is how one responds to adversity. I had responded not with rage, but with dignity, not with isolation, but with connection, not with despair, but with empowerment. In the quiet hours of the night, as the city lights shimmered, I felt a profound sense of agency. I had reclaimed my narrative, redefined my relationships, and set in motion a path that would ensure my presence and worth could no longer be dismissed or undermined. The journey ahead would require continued vigilance, reflection, and courage, but I was ready. The betrayal that once threatened to define me had instead become a catalyst for growth, a reminder that dignity once lost to others can always be reclaimed through deliberate, thoughtful action. The weeks following my own gathering had shifted the family dynamic in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. The subtle tremors of my presence began to ripple through their carefully constructed hierarchy, and I sensed a growing unease whenever I was mentioned in conversation. I had reclaimed my dignity privately, but now the challenge was public, tangible. I could feel the tension in the air whenever I crossed paths with certain relatives, the fleeting glances, the careful choice of words. It was intoxicating, in a quiet, restrained way, to realize that I was no longer invisible, that my absence or presence carried weight. Then came the invitation I had anticipated but dreaded, a larger family event, one that was part celebration, part obligation, including the very individuals who had orchestrated my previous humiliation. My heart skipped at the thought, oscillating between anxiety and determination. This was the moment where patience and strategy would truly be tested. I knew that walking in with grace and dignity was not enough. I needed to assert myself, not overtly, but through the subtleties of presence, engagement, and controlled confrontation. The day arrived, bright and unyielding. Los Angeles had that kind of clear light that magnifies everything, and as I drove toward the venue, I rehearsed in my mind the composure I needed to maintain. I had chosen a deep sapphire gown, simple yet elegant, and wore my hair in soft waves, letting my natural confidence radiate without overt effort. Each step through the grand entrance was deliberate, each smile and nod I exchanged a demonstration of quiet power. I felt their eyes on me, measuring, evaluating, calculating, and it was satisfying. I began with conversations carefully guided, ensuring that my voice was heard, my presence felt, without aggression. I interacted with those who had always respected me, subtly signaling to others that my dignity was intact, that I was no longer the silent, overlooked member of the family. The air shifted, almost imperceptibly but distinctly. Whispers followed me, eyes lingered, and for the first time I realized the extent to which my previous humiliation had underestimated my capacity for resilience. Then came the turning point. Rachel approached, hesitantly, her expression a mixture of shame and apprehension. "Margaret, she began, faltering. I met her gaze steadily, acknowledging her words without interruption. The room seemed to quiet around us, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of past grievances and the possibility of reconciliation or further confrontation. She continued, her voice low and earnest, attempting to explain, to justify, to seek forgiveness. I listened, noting the sincerity beneath her nervous exterior, and for a moment considered the complexities of human behavior, the fears and insecurities that often drive people to hurt those they love. Yet even as I listened, I felt a surge of clarity. Rachel's words, though important, were not the focus of my power. My dignity, my reclamation was already established. I could allow for reconciliation if it was genuine, but I would not allow excuses or manipulation to undermine the strength I had cultivated. I responded with calm authority, acknowledging her perspective while maintaining boundaries, making it clear that trust, once fractured, requires careful rebuilding. The moment was quiet but potent, a small, controlled assertion of emotional power that spoke louder than any confrontation could. The evening progressed, and I observed my family with a careful, analytical eye. Those who had participated in the previous betrayal seemed increasingly unsettled, their discomfort subtle but visible. Every polite nod, every forced smile, every attempt to engage in conversation was tinged with awareness of my presence and my regained control. It was an unspoken acknowledgement that their actions had consequences, not immediate in dramatic displays, but enduring in the way I carried myself and in the connections I had nurtured outside their manipulations. During a particularly quiet moment, I overheard a conversation that crystallized the depth of the shift. An uncle, previously a silent participant in the orchestrated humiliation, murmured to another relative, "I don't think she'll ever forgive, but she's stronger than we imagined." The words, though veiled, carried a resonance that filled me with quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted them to fear me, but because truth and integrity, once exercised with patience and strategy, are undeniable. Their recognition, however begrudging, confirmed that my approach, calm, deliberate, dignified, was effective. As the night wore on, I found myself in a space of reflection. The humiliation, the whispers, the exclusion, they had been painful, yes, but they had catalyzed a transformation I might never have experienced otherwise. I had rediscovered my voice, my presence, and my capacity for strategic action. I had cultivated a network of genuine support and had learned to navigate complex family dynamics with a blend of empathy, assertiveness, and self-respect. Each interaction, each conversation, each glance was now filtered through the lens of understanding, awareness, and control. By the end of the event, I realized that my journey was reaching a turning point. The family members who had previously sought to diminish me had begun to encounter the consequences of their actions, not through direct confrontation or revenge, but through the quiet power of my presence, the integrity of my choices, and the strength of my boundaries. The humiliation they had orchestrated had inadvertently revealed the depth of my resilience, the clarity of my vision, and the unwavering commitment to my own dignity. Returning home that night, I felt a profound sense of empowerment. The betrayal that had once seemed insurmountable had become a catalyst for growth, a teacher in the ways of strategy, emotional intelligence, and self-sovereignty. I understood that family dynamics are rarely simple, that betrayal can come from those we love most, and that the true measure of character is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in the way we navigate adversity. As I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the darkness, I reflected on the journey so far. Each step I had taken, from the initial shock to the quiet observation to the deliberate reclamation of space and dignity, had been deliberate, intentional, and rooted in self-respect. I had learned that patience, strategy, and unwavering presence can be more powerful than immediate confrontation or overt displays of anger. The narrative of my life was, once again, in my control. And yet, I knew the story was not complete. The final chapter, the moment of full recognition and karmic equilibrium, was still ahead. The seeds had been sown through patience, strategy, and integrity, but the harvest required continued vigilance, careful observation, and the courage to act when the moment was right. I felt ready, prepared to navigate the final stages of this journey with the clarity, strength, and dignity I had cultivated. As I prepared for sleep, the city quiet around me, I allowed myself a small, private smile. The humiliation that had once threatened to define me had instead become a source of strength, a reminder that dignity is not given but claimed, and the power of deliberate, thoughtful action can transform even the deepest wounds into opportunities for growth and self-realization. The weeks leading up to the final family gathering had been filled with a tense anticipation I could not ignore. I had spent countless hours planning my own response, observing interactions from a distance, and carefully cultivating a network of support that reminded me I was not alone. Every detail, from the placement of seating to the timing of conversations, was mapped out in my mind, and yet I knew that true control lay not in manipulating others, but in mastering my own reactions. I had spent decades navigating family dynamics with patience and care, and now, for the first time, I was free to act solely for myself. The day arrived, bright and unyielding Los Angeles sun reflecting off the city streets, warm yet unforgiving. I chose a gown of deep plum, elegant and understated, allowing my presence to speak louder than any words I could muster. My hair fell in soft waves around my shoulders, and my makeup was minimal, emphasizing the natural strength in my features rather than masking it. As I drove to the venue, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the whispers, the deliberate exclusion, the humiliation that had once seemed insurmountable. Every step had been a lesson in patience, strategy, and self-respect, and now the culmination of it all was within reach. Walking through the doors, I felt a palpable shift in the room. The very family members who had orchestrated my earlier humiliation were present, their faces betraying a mix of curiosity, unease, and cautious acknowledgement. I did not rush to engage. I allowed my presence to settle naturally, moving with grace and confidence, greeting those who welcomed me with warmth while observing the subtle reactions of others. Every glance, every whisper, every carefully chosen word reinforced the power of restraint, the quiet authority of someone who had endured and emerged stronger. Rachel approached first, her expression hesitant, her voice a whisper over the din of conversation. "Margaret, I can't begin to apologize for what happened before. I was complicit and I was wrong." I looked at her steadily, acknowledging the words without surrendering the power I had reclaimed. Her apology, though meaningful, was not the goal. It was the recognition that true reconciliation is rooted in understanding and change, not empty gestures. I allowed myself a soft nod, signaling awareness and openness, but I would not let the past be erased lightly. As the evening unfolded, I navigated the complex web of interactions with precision. I engaged with family members selectively, offering warmth and conversation to those who had shown respect and boundaries to those who had not. The effect was subtle but profound. Those who had once sought to diminish me now found themselves confronted not by overt confrontation, but by the undeniable reality of my presence, dignity, and composure. Whispers followed me again, this time tinged with apprehension rather than cruelty. The balance of power had shifted, quietly, irrevocably. Midway through the evening, the pivotal moment arrived. A cousin, known for his role in orchestrating the previous humiliation, approached, his expression awkward, hesitant. He attempted small talk, a clumsy acknowledgement of my presence, but the weight of prior actions hung heavily between us. I responded calmly, deliberately maintaining eye contact, letting silence fill the space when words failed to convey sincerity. His discomfort was palpable. It was the first true acknowledgement that their actions had consequences beyond immediate perception. The subtlety of my approach, composure, confidence, and unwavering self-respect was far more effective than confrontation could have been. As the night progressed, I observed the family's dynamics shift incrementally. Those who had ignored or demeaned me previously now found themselves negotiating space with someone who had redefined her own power. It was fascinating, almost poetic, to witness the ripple effects of patient strategy and deliberate action. I engaged in conversations with care, allowing my words to convey intelligence, warmth, and integrity. Each interaction was a quiet assertion of agency, a demonstration that dignity is claimed through presence and action, not through passive endurance. During a quiet moment near the dessert table, I overheard a conversation that crystallized everything I had worked for. Two cousins whispered, "We underestimated her. All those years we thought she would just take it, but she's unshakable." Their words, though veiled, carried a profound resonance. The humiliation they had attempted to impose had backfired. It had revealed the depth of my resilience and the clarity of my strength. I allowed myself a private, subtle smile. Justice, in its quiet, deliberate form, was unfolding exactly as it should. Later, as the gathering began to wind down, a conversation with my uncle, the mastermind of much of the previous cruelty, took place. He approached, hesitant, and attempted to offer excuses, explanations, and half-hearted apologies. I listened, maintaining composure, allowing him to speak without interruption. When he finished, I spoke calmly, deliberately. "I appreciate your acknowledgement, but it will take time to rebuild trust. Actions, not words, demonstrate respect." The room felt heavier after my statement, the weight of truth undeniable. This was not gloating or revenge, it was assertion, dignity, and measured response, a demonstration that integrity cannot be easily dismissed. As the evening ended, I stepped outside into the cool Los Angeles night. The city lights reflected off the pavement, vibrant and indifferent, yet comforting in their constancy. I felt a profound sense of liberation. The humiliation that once defined me no longer held power. I had reclaimed my narrative, asserted my presence, and established boundaries that could not be ignored. The journey had been long, painful, and fraught with emotional landmines, but I had emerged with clarity, strength, and dignity intact. In that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself. Never again would I allow others to define my worth or dictate my narrative. The betrayal that had once threatened to overshadow my life had become a teacher, a catalyst for transformation, and a reminder that dignity, resilience, and integrity are the most powerful forms of justice. And as the Los Angeles skyline stretched endlessly before me, I felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that I had not only survived, but triumphed on my own terms with unwavering strength and grace. If this story shocked you or kept you on the edge, drop a comment and let me know your reaction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next one.